Shalom, Chaverim. Shalom. This is Yadon. This is Yadon. This is Rasiadonis, Rastafari LOJ, Line of Judah Society, Rastafari Israelites, and here on the RJ, RastafariJews, or the RTJ. So the question here is there and can there be anti-Semitism against black Jews and Beta Israel, against Israelites, against those black peoples? When I say Beta Israel, we're not just saying the Ethiopian Jews, although they are Beit Israel, Beta Israel, but all of the Beta Israel, throughout the world, who happen to be classified and called in this modern time world system, as, quote, black peoples. Because many times we call black people, we call African. But even though when we as a people identify ourselves as Yehudi, as Jews or Judahites, Judeans of the tribe of Judah, like the lion of the tribe of Judah, and or Beit Yisrael, Beta Israel, Beit Yisrael, aka in the Ethiopian and in the Ge'ez, Beta Israel, right? So, can there be? That's the question here, because I was doing some research, and we're going to bring out also the origins of this terminology, anti-Semitism. I have to thank my late earthly father, for the book that he wrote, The Antiquities of the Black Race. Some of y'all have it, some of y'all have checked it out, but I'll also be pointing to that particular book as well. But here, just a little AI. AI right here is AI, anti-Semitic. I want to do a video on anti-Semitic and is AI anti-Semitic, because what does anti-Semiticism, is, and what should it be defined as? We know how other communities, other Jews, define it, and mainly many ones who are either Ashkenazi or have, European relationship or European origins, and might connect their experience to like the Holocaust, and those are very tragic and awful events that happened. But in addition to that, this is not speaking about that. This is speaking about the terminology anti-Semitic, because the Hebrew language, let me just say this right here, the Hebrew language is Afro-Semitic, right? The Hebrew culture is Afro. Even when we say Afro-Semitic, this is clearly a link with what is called Africa, the continent Africa, and also African cultures that may be defined as Semitic, biblically speaking, Semitic, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, is anti-Semitism, right? In other words, is there anti-Semitism against black Jews? That's the first part of the question right there. Secondarily, is this also applicable to Beta Israel? Starting with the Beta Israel, the black Jews of Ethiopia and those who immigrated and were brought to the state of Israel, and also other black Jews, right, and Israelites as well, right? Now, getting into those qualifications, that'll be a whole video. People have different ideas about that, but generally I think this is a kind of a mainstream question. And we went and we looked up, right? We looked up some things on AI, right? So this is where we kind of derive our modern roots right here, when we say we the black Jews of the lion of the tribe of Judah, right? We, right, the black Jews of the lion of the tribe of Judah, Ethiopian Hebrews, right? The Ethiopian Hebrews, right, of the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews, right? Commandment keepers, congregation of the living God, right? Fuller title in Jesus Christ, but we can speak on that as well, which we do. We do speak and preach on that. But this is on the general question of anti-Semitism, right? So when we speak about ourselves in a very general sense as Jewish, right? More specifically as we the black Jews, right? Directly our links, our connection, right, with those of our fellow peoples, on the African continent and throughout the diaspora, right? Throughout the diaspora, right? So here we have a still that says the Jewish history of Harlem. This is a virtual stroll through the neighborhood. Now, this is interesting to connect this with this right here. Now notice the dates on this book. When Harlem was Jewish, 1870 to 1930. Now 1930 is very important because of the anointing, right, and the coronation, the crowning, right, of Rastafari, aka Teferi, Negus Teferi Mekonnen, right, upon the throne of David in Ethiopia, speaking of the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Haile Selassie I, King of Kings of Ethiopia, elect of God, right, who was coronated in 1930. So on this particular book by Jeffrey S. Gurok, right, it's entitled When Harlem Was Jewish. I thought this was interesting, the years that they point to, right, because we know that the Civil War ended, when did the Civil War end, right, 1865, so 5 years after it, we have 1870, right, and then to 1930, and 1930 in the coronation of Haile Selassie, and we also know how our respective communities, Rabbi Wentworth, Arthur Matthew, and other communities, how they noted, the significance of that, and also the connection there, with some of our, we could say, our latter day, refounding fathers. You know what I'm saying? So, is there anti-Semitism, or can there be anti-Semitism? Because what we get to hear is that this term is only used for certain Jews, or certain of those who are identifiable as Jewish. And yet when we look at racism, right, even when we look at some of the research, let's get some of the research right here, right? So some of the research right here, this is what we had looked up. So we first looked it up right here. Let's bring this up right here. We said anti-Semitism against Afro-Semitic blacks, right? And then we went to the AI overview, and AI overview says anti-Semitism and the black community. Now you see how they turned around the question. The question up here was this. Let me zoom in on this. Anti-Semitism against Afro-Semitic blacks. Now, of course, perhaps we should put blacks with a capital B, but it is what it is, right? So here they said, they gave some alternatives to Afro-Semitic, as two words right there. But we know that the Hebrew biblical, what's called the Hebrew language, really more correctly Yehudit, is Afro-Semitic. The biblical Hebrew language is Afro-Semitic, right? And that's a very important point, because the people also are Afro-Semitic, right? But so now this answers it like this. It says a very complex and evolving relationship. It's like we heard that the term anti-Semitism is also a evolving term. We heard one on this back and forth with Candace Owens, and I think it was a Jew. I don't know if he was a rabbi or not. I was just overhearing it. I was listening to it. I wasn't watching it. Anyway, he was basically stating that the term anti-Semitism is actually a kind of like an evolving term. He was using the same thing. I said, wait, is this a setup right here? How come both of these have the same evolving relate? So there's a complex and evolving, right? You hear that? Evolving relate. So let's read if they answer our question. So the relationship between black and Jewish community in the United States has been a complex and evolving one, marked by both periods of strong alliance and instances of tension, including anti-Semitism within some segments of the black communities. Oh, wow. So you mean there has not been we have to call it anti-black, right? Has it been anti-black? Has it been racism as well on the opposite side? Because a sub-issue of this, but very important connection, is are Jews white? Because it seems like many Jews, even though they have do their DNA, and they some of them outside of the state of Israel, presented as being like large percentage Ashkenazi and large percentage European, right? And remember, European, that's Indo-European, right? Indo-European. That's a whole different, lineage right there, just on the basic facts. And this is not to state that there's not, Shemitic or Afro-Semitic people in Europe. I mean, we know about 1492 in those events as well. And notice that many of those people, they were exiled back in 1492 to parts of North Africa, to Africa basically. But historically, black and Jewish communities shared a bond as fellow minority groups. Well, I think there's more to it, and it seems as though, like, when we both were down, right, we worked together, right? But as one got up, right, one almost left behind. It's like the black community, by and large, seems to be left behind. That's the interpretation that some have shared with us, right? Whether it's true or not, we can, get into more details on that. But who face oppression and discrimination, right? We could go back to the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights movement, how the Ku Klux Klan sought to kill blacks and Jews, right? And sometimes even stated that they hated white European Jews, because that's what they were. They were white Jews. Some were able to pass, others were not able to. Some changed their names too. Some Europeans who had immigrated who were Jewish to America, right? Because some of them, not everybody wanted to deal with oppression and discrimination, right? Now, for we as Afro-Semitic people, as so-called black and brown people, that's a little bit harder for us within a racist, right, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant racist society. So there are commonalities, but it seems as though that has been left behind. But here it says black Americans often sympathize with the Jewish experience of facing persecution in Europe and drew parallels to their own struggles. But pause on that for a moment. Many black Americans identify themselves as Israelites and Hebrews, Ethiopian Hebrews and Israelites, and made those connections long before, right, we even heard anything about these persecutions in Europe, especially with the Nazi Holocaust. Those things came later on historically. But let's go on. Cooperation between the communities peaked after World War II, right? A period sometimes referred to as the golden age of the relationship. Now, let's note, too, that we had upon the throne of great King David in the world, right, a claimant, right, to the tribe of Judah. Let's not forget that. Speaking of Haile Selassie, at that particular time, right? So part of why that relationship probably was the way it was is because of what was going on, not just here in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere, but also what was going on in the East, in the state of Israel and Ethiopia, and the Arab world and the African world. So we have to put that into context. Now, during the civil rights movement, right, many Jews actively supported the fight for racial justice, with figures like Abraham, Joshua Heschel, right, marching alongside Martin Luther King Jr. And this is a picture that often is kind of placed up there. I don't know if we have the fuller picture of it, but we can kind of show you a little bit of that right here. It's a small excerpt, right? Oh, here we go right here. Right, here's one, right? Now, this has come from a site, Black American Jews, right? And it's not a new thing. It's not just because of World War II or the Holocaust that occurred in Europe, but even before that. So I'm saying much before that, when we really see many, not all, but many black people's connection, right, with the Israelites of the Bible, their identification, both their self-identification and also being identified by others. The thing that really changed things in the world was the Jewish Holocaust, because it gathered and garnered such sympathy, and along with that, the establishment of the State of Israel, that it's like there was a whole shift, right, away from the identification of the Israelites and black people's experience in the Americas. That was something that was very big, and that's something that has been, for the most part, like forgotten or left behind. So we have to note that as well, right? I mean, that's a very, very important point. But let's go on right here. So as we read this article, it points to some of those things. However, starting in the mid-60s, a more militant approach within the civil rights movement, coupled with other social economic factors, began to strain this relationship. Now, this is a popular view that has been put out, but it's only, you see, we're only looking over here in America, the Western Hemisphere. But we have to remember that we have a worldwide. Things can happen over in the East that affects things over here in the West. And with the state of Israel and also Imperial Ethiopia with the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Now note that there we have another powerful link, that there is the tribe of Judah, right, and those of the tribe of Judah in Africa, right? And now we get to know there's many other, people that even have been accepted by some of the state of Israel rabbis and others on that side as actually being, Israelite or Jewish, quote, Jewish people, which is very interesting because of DNA and other, factors as well. So what began to strain the relationship, that probably needs to be a point picked up on. But notice, our question still is not answered. So AI, right, is AI anti-Semitic? So this is a question to ask. Is AI, of course, a lot of people are going to say, no, it's not, because it may be telling your side of the story, but what about the other half of the story? This is what we're saying. Some instances of black anti-Semitism emerge. So it's being used in a kind of a one-way sense. Even back then, maybe a lot of black people didn't really perhaps know, but since then, a lot much more has, when we speak about Hebrew being an Afro-Semitic language, and even the culture of the Bible being very Afro-Semitic, right? Look up Afro-Semitic, right? And there's many even ones amongst the Jewish community that would even acknowledge, yes, they even claim to be Afro-Semitic. So the question we're going to ask is, where is the Afro or the African connection, since there's been a lot of racism, right, directed to black people, right, by white Jewish people, right? Not all, but when is the white Jewish community to address that as well? So a balanced address, right? So here it says some instances of black anti-Semitism emerge, drawing on harmful myths about Jewish people. I mean, wait, hold on for a moment. What are they talking about? That my question was about, is there anti-Semitism against blacks? Maybe we will ask the question again to say against black Jews, right? I think we have to get right to the point of the question. But just to give you a little bit more, kind of a quick overview here, several factors have been identified as contributing to this tension. Differing perspectives on Jewish identity and status. Look at that. Some within the black community, right, perceive the Jewish community, right? Now notice, in the black community, we also have the black Jews, right? And even those who are identified, right, and even self-identified as Israelites or as Hebrews, right? And they believe in Torah, they practice, you know what I mean? We have ones who are more into the Old Testament tradition, but also those who embrace, the New Covenant. And I know this may not be popular with some of those within Judaism as it stands today, but that is still their right, right? So we hear about terms Kushi, Kushi is a term, Kushi, that actually means the Ethiopian. It's actually used in certain parts of the world, in the so-called Middle East, as the N-word, right? These have not been addressed, and it doesn't seem like they gather much media. Maybe we have to really educate our own community about this, right? But perceived, right, as achieved whiteness. So notice, when we say whiteness with the white Jewish community, right, and when we add Jew or Jewish to the black community, this is where one of the major tension and problem is. When we ask the question, is there, or even can there be anti-Semitism against blacks, right, against black Jews, it should be yes. Yes, there can be. Not saying that there's many that do this, or a lot are doing this, or this is going on here or there, but does it happen? Has it happened? Has it happened that some in the Jewish community might be Jewish, but not really being tzaddik, right? And therefore they might have appealed to whiteness, right, in the very same way that other white people have, and therefore the backlash is against black and blackness, right? Or the disassociation. See, the disassociation is really different than the way AI is presenting it here when we look at evidence. And there's many Jewish books, too, written by European white Jews, right, that actually back this up. right? But that's not being, it doesn't seem like it's connected to what we're receiving from AI right here, right? So it says resentment, the feeling that Jews exploited poor blacks while achieving their own success. Well, people being people, this can happen. I mean, the Torah is written in that way, not just to the Jewish, but the Israelite people and just to all people, anybody who can read it, right? Speaking about, fairness, what is right. That means that we as people, right? Not just this people or that people. So just because one identifies themselves as Jewish doesn't mean that one always do that which is tzodek or tzaddik, right? Always what is righteous. Right, but economic tensions, historically tensions arose over the perception of Jewish predominance in businesses in black neighborhoods. I mean, black people have supported Jewish businesses, sometimes being employed by them, sometimes getting great deals. There is a history of those good things, but there's also the history when things turn bad, and we need to be honest on both sides, so to speak. Accusation that Jews block black economic aspirations. Well, are any of these accusations justified, right? And is there any way that we can rectify these things today? Because, see, it seems like, well, that happened back in the 60s and the 70s, and they just left that behind. Remember, the way that you go up, right, the people that you pass by or step on or use to get you up, right, you also may have to face, right, if you happen to go down. Right? And in life, we get to see these ups and downs. Now, they say black nationalism and separatism. Some black nationalist ideologies, like those espoused by figures like Marcus Garvey, and later by the Nation of Islam, incorporated anti-Semitic narratives into their rhetoric. Well, okay. Can we ask whether amongst Latter-day Jews, any anti-black rhetorics? Right? Are there any black rhetorics that have been also incorporated on the other side? Right? Misinformation and conspiracy theories. Figures like Leonard Jeffries. Now, just a little footnote. I was there, at Brooklyn College. I think there was Mayor Kahana. I was there when there was protests against Mayor Kahana, and I was there when there was protests against Leonard Jeffries, but that's not being mentioned in any of this, right? Khalid Abdul Muhammad have promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and good claims about Jewish control of the slave trade, media, and other sectors of society. Well, there has been more honest research, though it's not reflected here in the AI overview, where, right, some of this has been admitted by other European Jewish scholars have admitted that, yes, they've sought to minimize it, and maybe some of the facts can put it into a different proportion, right? However, it did exist. It did happen, right? It seems like only when people kind of exaggerate things do it really come up to the point that people really begin to say, hey, there's something going on there. Geographic proximity and localized intergroup conflict. In areas with shared neighborhoods, like parts of New York, a history of tension and conflict between black and Jewish populations has been noted. Now, they might be going back to the Crown Heights riot, back in the 90s. I recall this, and they even had some movies, about that as well. It's crucial to acknowledge that black anti-Semitism does not reflect the view of the entire black community. What's being left out of this? What we're showing you. We're showing you that there's a large proportion of the population, not all, right? It may not even be 50%, but they are totally being ignored in this conversation about Jewishness. That black people are never being included within that conversation. And we're not just talking about today, but we're talking about historically. It's other scholars, other ones have to do their research, put out on YouTube, social media, that start to present facts that are known to some of the intelligentsia, right, and the academics, but are not being brought forward, right? And that right there seems like anti-Semitism, right, against we, the black Jews, right? Just honestly speaking. However, surveys have shown that anti-Semitic attitudes are more prevalent among black Americans compared to white Americans. Well, think about this. If you and someone else right, had shared experiences and helped each other, and then it's like you've been left behind, right, and turned against, right, I think they would be more so than someone else who didn't have such a relationship, right? So when they compare Black American and white American, it's totally two different things. Remember, it's many of the same white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that even in Europe, according to narratives from other Jews, were persecuting Jews in Europe, right? Check what I'm saying? So we should be on the same side, but the question is why we're not. They say some things are only skin deep, but then, most do, like fools, judge books by the cover and not by the content. Right? Though the level of anti-Semitism correlates strongly with education level. So I guess what's being said from Jewish Virtual Library saying that, well, the more educated blacks get, the less anti-Semitic they get. Right? We can go into that, but this is not to go into that. Addressing black anti-Semitism requires a multifaceted approach that includes, so there is no racism from white Jewish people against black Jewish people, against black Israelite people, or just against black people in general? I mean, let's ask that question, right? Because there's the evidence that we can provide, but, right now we're just seeking to get this information out and maybe start a conversation. Promoting education and countering misinformation. Tackling ignorance, dispelling anti-Semitic stereotypes is essential. So City Journal, they're pointing to different sites, encouraging intergroup dialogue. That's what we're seeking to do by this video. Encouraging intergroup dialogue and understanding. Creating spaces for black and Jewish, we want to create a space for black Jewish, right, and black Israelite, right? Those who share something in common with the general Jewish community because of Torah, the land, other issues, to engage in constructive dialogue that can hopefully help bridge divides and foster empathy. Combating white supremacy, right? Well, what if some of our people, right? See, in the black community, we've experienced what a lot of European and white Jews go through on one level. And people say, what level is this? Well, we've had many people in our community who could pass for white, right? Because I hear that many Jews say that they're not white. And there's a whole kind of slew of information out there, that basically is saying that people stereotype Jews as being white, but Jews are not really white. They may appear like white, but they're not really white. All of this, right? When the communities were closer and tighter together, guess what? We were able to combat white supremacy. So when we go back to the golden age is when we combat, because remember World War II, fighting Nazi Germany and the racism and all of that, right? So we was able to combat that. That lasted for a couple of decades, and then it was lost because we proposed that many white Jewish people, instead of continue to combat white supremacy, have joined on some level or just gotten quiet about it because it no longer affected them, right? Especially with the creation of the state of Israel, so forth and so on. Recognizing that anti-Semitism and anti-black racism, and notice this right here, the first time that within this whole article they even acknowledge any anti-black racism. Now think about this for a moment. It is anti-Semitism, and this largely is defined as being against like Jews, right? Especially when we say white Jews, because there's no other way to qualify. When we say white Jews, people get offended, right? Well, can we just call ourselves Jews without having to bow to other Jews' standard? I mean, can you call yourself a man without having to bow to another man's standard and still be recognized as a man? Check. Recognizing that anti-Semitism and anti-black racism are both fueled by white supremacy, and working to dismantle its structures is vital. Now, this is according to the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. Well, kudos to them, right? Give some applause to them for at least, noting that there's anti-Semitism, right? Usually this is fine as being anti-Jew or Jewish or one who is orientated that way, but there's also anti-black racism. And with the by and large, it seems still like a white Jewish community when we just identify in simple terms. I know people say it's more complex than that, but still notice, we as black people are continuing identity. There's some things that's so obvious, right? And ones want to know, well, why are we so active? And many of us are so vocal, you know what I mean? Even amongst many of the Israelite communities, is because this is not something, the anti-black racism is not something we can easily escape. And when we say, well, we are Yehudi, we are Jewish, when we say we are Israelites, we abide by Torah, or we, you know what I mean? Any of those things that we would do, people start to question it, and it's even more not just black, but it's also anti-Semitic, right? And remember that Hebrew, right, the culture and the language is Afro-Semitic, right? It's Afro-Semitic. This needs to be acknowledged. Now, holding individuals and platforms accountable, addressing instances of anti-Semitic rhetoric from public figures, and promoting online safety are important steps in curbing the spread of hatred, according to stateofblackamerica.org, right? So, addressing instances, but here we're seeking to address what is anti-Semitic. If the Hebrew language, biblical culture is definable as Afro-Semitic, this means that it's both anti-black, first, overtly, obviously, and if Jews are not white, then we should have your support in this, right? Anti-black, and it's anti-Semitic because they're identifying us with that culture of people, right? Whether we would say Jewish, Judaic, as well as Israel and Israelitish, right? While challenges persist, the shared history of struggle for justice and the potential for a common agenda offer hope for continued cooperation and a stronger, more inclusive society free from all forms of prejudice. Now, this is how it basically seals up, right? And there's various different other articles, right? Black anti-Semitism, right, in America, they say, well, boycotting Israel, they define that as being black anti-Semitism. Notice, they put black anti-Semitism, right? Calling the kettle, you know what I mean? Ain't that something? Curb black anti-Semitism, right? Black, there's anti-Semitism. Okay, these articles here just to show. Notice how they put black anti-Semitism on everything. But isn't Semitic Afro-Semitic, right? It's in the Hebrew Afro-Semitic, right? And the Afro part is the black part. You know what I'm saying? That Afro part there, right? We used to even say that some of the, European and other Jews, they even seem to have had afros, right? Right? See, we're speaking to potential inclusion, right? But we really need to stop this stuff like black anti-Semitism. Because we see that and it's like, wow. You know what I mean? Now, some, especially, some of the later generation may not even understand how all these things go together because, the education today is mainly by social media, right? So black anti-Semitism and Jewish racism. Notice they don't say Jewish anti-blackness. You see what I'm saying? So on one hand, they include, right, the so-called racial or so-called color identification, but on the other hand, it is excluded, right? Even now, there's a popular meme and trope, which is basically stating that, well, Jewish people is not whiteness, going against this perceived myth. It's being redefined as a myth that Jews are white. Yet we have the obvious history of things within America where many ones have cast in their lot. So when things were tough, they was with us, right? When things got better, we were left behind, right? This is how some of our people look at it, and they make strong and relevant arguments. So this is just pointing to, this is what you get to see when you go down this particular rabbit hole right here. You know what I mean? You go down this particular rabbit hole. I guess Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, and we fought against the racism there. The racism also in Nazi Germany was against blacks and Jews, so we shared a common denominator then. But it seems as though today, right, there's no commonality, right? There's no commonality. There's not that equality, right? The equality, as people, right? It's like racism. If we don't say racism, right, like there won't be no racism, right? In that sense, right? So racism, right? Because even anti-Semitism could be defined, right, as racism too. So it's like, on one hand, one can say, hey, that's anti-Semitic and racist, right? On our hand, well, it's just racist, even if we are black Jews or Yehudi or Israelites, Beta Israel, right? We can say that's anti-Semitic, right? See, the problem is not that this is not true, is what we're presenting will basically change the whole dynamic, right? What's this right here? This is interesting. Black voices turn to Jewish black Zionists to fight anti-Semitism strategically. This is interesting, right? That's pretty interesting. Let's see if we can just go here for a moment right here. Okay, we're gonna definitely have to come back to this right here, right? Okay, because this is basically speaking more of, we could say our language. We haven't gone into any detail of it. Tikva, Ilana, Bruce, don't know where she stands or whatnot, but we can see at least what she's putting out. Turn to black Jewish Zionists to fight anti-Semitism strategically, right? Black Jewish Zionists bring a unique perspective. We're are part of both black and Jewish communities with a deep understanding of each community's intersectional challenges. We are the crucial element to help naturally on the anti-Semitic battleground and extend an olive branch to other marginalized communities. Okay. So she's saying black Jewish Zionists are uniquely positioned to engage with both black and Jewish communities in a way that establishes genuine solidarity. Now, this can be true, but then we also have to note the experience of many black Jewish Zionists, or ones who believe in, like, say, a state for Israelite people and Jewish Yehudi people, like the black Jews of Harlem, like the African Israelites of Jerusalem, like the Beta Israel. Yet, over the years, there has been a lot of anti-Semitism directed against black Jews or Jews of color, of obvious color, whether they're Ethiopians, whether those from America, whether those from other parts of Africa or Eritrea, and this is all factual. You see, when we mention these sort of things, people say, oh, forget about that, that was the past. The sterilization, oh, forget about that, that was... These are major things, right, that should really have more of our people a little more vocal and getting the other side to address it, right, and to repudiate it, right, to repudiate it, as they say, do you repudiate that? To repudiate it, right? We don't need to beg inauthentic voices to defend us when we have leaders within our own community ready and capable of doing so. I mean, this is true. This is true, but yet we as black Jews and as Israelites have been greatly marginalized in the media, right? And sometimes even being marginalized, right, by those who should be helping to magnify, our voice, and reshare, as it says right here, reach out, fund our work, amplify our voices, right? Reshare our content and include us, right? And include us. Now, notice that with the state of Israel, there was many black people identifying as Jew, right? As Jewish, some as Israel or Hebrew, that have sought, right, such, right? Have sought such, but yet, because of those anti-Semitic elements, even amongst, we could say, the Jewish others or some of our brothers, what I'm saying, that has not really been responded to effectively, right? You remember for years, and let's just do this here so you see that we're going to hopefully come back to this particular work right here, and grab it. We could have actually grabbed it right now. since we kind of segued. This wasn't part of our original, demonstration here, right? But when we saw this right here, we said it's interesting. How many of you recall, that teaching that we had done, right? That teaching that we had done on, we're gonna have to go back and kind of get these right here. That teaching we had did on African Zionism, right? I don't know if you'll recall that one right there. African Zionism. We'll have to see if we can get that one up. It was on some of the other channels, right? Yeah, and many of our community, when we speak in this way, right, we might be misunderstood as well, even with this video, right? Because what some people figure is like STFU, just shut the, just shut the front door, shut it up, we're not to say anything. But yet, when there is need on the other side, right, it's like, well, why aren't you saying anything, right? BET. What's this? Black X Jewish, Black times Jewish, right? Notice we keep dancing. Our black people keep dancing around this, even though they know that there is a large population of us, or at least a portion of the population of us, that do identify, right, as either Jewish or as Israelites, right, and are sincere, right, about our belief, just as you have people who convert, who may have not lived Jewish, but they convert, quote unquote, they convert, right, and they are embraced fully as Jewish, even though there's a lot of question, right? So the same questions that are asked to us are not asked to others. And this appears to be a form of anti-Semitism if that's only if the term, right, if the term was to be applied properly. Now, as we said, we went down this kind of rabbit hole here, right, as you can see right here. Black anti-Semitism and Jewish racism. Why black anti-Semitism and white Jewish racism? Have you noticed that? So they put us on the spot. Okay, we're black. Oh yeah, those blacks. Right? And well, we're just Jewish. We're not. This whiteness thing is a false equivalency. All right, but what shows that it's not? It's almost like a child that never been told that they were wrong. You see, one thing about we as black people is that we have, been told we were wrong when we're right. Right? We've been told we were wrong when we're wrong. So when we're told that we're wrong, we tend to take a moment to think about it and to consider it. Now, however we consider it, we used to. But there is those on the other side, right? Almost like a spoiled, petulant, like a spoiled child, right? Who you can't say that to them, otherwise they pout, they get upset, they break things. What about the Al Jolson thing? Come on now. Was this... See, and even the Al Jolson, let's stop for a moment. Let's pause for a moment. Even the Al Jolson thing. I've heard ones explain this to me and say, well, it wasn't really racist in that sense. It was like Al Jolson was admiring, right? He was admiring us. He was trying to almost like, you try to get in the spirit of something, so you put on blackface and you do all man, you know what I mean, and like to get soul or something like that. It wasn't racism like other white people did, right? This is what we are told, right? It's a misunderstanding, right? And you know what? We actually accept it as a misunderstanding. Right, so now look at this over here. This here says how to talk about black anti-Semitism. Well, how about how to talk about white anti-Semitism? Not just with white Jewish people. It can be to white people. It can be to Jewish people, or Jewish and white people, right? Concerning white people, their anti-Semitism to, quote, white Jews, but also black Jews. Same thing, you know what I mean? What about white? How to talk about it, right? Now, if we put something out like this, how to talk about white anti-Semitism, right? Why are they going to shut us down? They will say, hey, you can't say that, you know what I mean? Or perhaps in the algorithms, marginalize it so it doesn't get a more popular, circulation. Well, anyway, brothers and sisters, like, share, and subscribe. I already had went to this, right? Let's go over here. Let's see, went to this page, right? Okay, here we went down here. There was another one. Let's see if we can, right? Let's see. Against blacks. There was another page that we had wanted to share. I think it's anti-Semitism. Let's see if we can do this right here. Let's see if it says anti-Semitism, right, against blacks. Okay. I recall now. Anti-Semitism, right? Anti-Semitism against, yes. And then we said capital B, right? Black, right? Who are Semitic. There we go. You see it for yourself. Against blacks who are Semitic. Okay, here we clear that. Okay, so notice under this one. So remember the first question, AI. I don't know if AI is being anti-Semitic there. It just totally took us down another way. Basically, it pointed all of the anti-Semitic things against black people, not against those clearly racial. See, we have to use terms like racist, right? Almost like we're denied using the term anti-Semitic unless it's speaking about them. But what about us, right? And if it's about we, then it should be no problem for us to utilize this because, after all, right, Hebrew and the biblical tradition is Afro-Semitic. Anti-Semitism and the black, you see the first thing that comes up? You see the first thing that comes up. I don't know whether we should even go through this right here, right? They've been criticized for expressing anti-Semitic, anti-white beliefs. Also, we could say the black Hebrew Israelites, anti-African. You know what I mean? What it says right here, the black Hebrew Israelite movement originated in the late 19th and 20th centuries, with groups formed in the U.S. by both African Americans, so-called black Americans, and West Indian immigrants. You see that? Right? While not all black Hebrew Israelites hold anti-Semitic beliefs. But see, that's why I stick to the point about what is anti-Semitic. Right? What is it really? But then some say that it's an evolving term. Right? Will it ever evolve our way? Right? I mean, it already does apply to us, but there's the popular, right, mis and disinformation out there that makes it seem like we can only be the ones being anti-Semitic. We cannot be on the opposite side, right, being the victims of anti-Semitic, attacks, right? Some sects within the movement are considered black supremacists and anti-Semitic. Now, some of you just heard how I just kind of panted on that right there for a moment, because we wanted to talk about the sterilization that went on, right? Against, first it was denying, and kudos to Haaretz. And I don't know if the Times of Israel had an article on it, but at least some of the newspapers did publish. It wasn't a retraction, but they did publish that it was proven that many Beta Israel of Ethiopian Jews were sterilized. Right, many of them was. They said that it might have been somewhat of a reversible thing. I didn't get all into the woods and all into detail, but what it came down to is that this was alleged. When it was alleged, right, most ones said it was anti-Semitic. Oh, this is black anti-Semitism. And then when it's proven that the ones you call anti-Semitic, ones you call Semitic, was doing this against another, right, Afro-Semitic, or really an indigenous Afro-Semitic people. Because remember that when we speak about the Ethiopian Jews and Eritrean Jews, we speak about Amharic. Amharic is the Afro-Semitic language. Ge'ez, Ethiopic, Afro-Semitic language. We have the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It doesn't say Lion of the tribe of Judaism, but the Lion of the tribe of Judah. While not all black Hebrew Israelites hold this, right, some sects within the movement are considered black supremacists and anti-Semitic. Look at that right there. What is the opposite of black supremacists? Well, it's the white supremacy. What is the opposite of the anti-Semitic? It's the white Jews. So you see how it's like to some within our community, it seems like some have shifted sides, or the great majority, because there's still some of the white Jews and others who are on our side, but the great majority have switched sides. Some extremist sects within the BHI, right, movement hold that black people are the true descendants of the ancient Israelites, and that white Jews are imposters, and this is according to an article in George Washington University. Now, there's some truth to that, but yet they say some extremist groups, so the way they put it out, ADL and the rest of them, is as though all. When do we have the defense of those of us who are, right, but are getting backlash against those who are basically using racism while being on the Semitic side? They're still using racism against those who are, quote, black, end quote. Some groups within the BHI movement have been designated as hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Isn't this interesting? Due to their anti-Semitic and anti-white beliefs. Okay. So, are we saying that Jewish people cannot be racist? Now, you see, for that, I don't know, this video might get, they say flagged, it might be taken down because, we don't really have a clear forum, right, to dialogue, right, and we'll see, right. The rest of this here, black-Jewish relation in the United States, shared experiences of discrimination, collaborated for the fight for social justice and equality, especially during the civil rights movement. They're talking about something that occurred, right, 40, 50, 60, about 60, right, 60, some might say going on 70, about 60 years ago. It's like when people say, what have you done for me lately, right, or what have you done with we lately, right? Even the backlash against a lot of the black communities from the West, from parts of Africa, from Ethiopia, in the state of Israel, even though that's not the overall, many of my brothers and sisters, those who are actually, because we do have ones who are in the state of Israel, you know what I mean, that actually, many of them have told us that, those videos we see, it's not what happens all the time. I told them, right, it's not what happens all the time, but it's what happens. Where is the repudiation? Like if a black man, a woman, speaks something that is against the white Jewish community. I have to say white Jewish, because as long as we are not included and we're a community apart, right, then we have to use those qualifiers, right? They'll say to everybody, do you, renounce, denounce, repudiate, reject, all these kind of words, do you, and make it as a qualifier, and everybody would get up and say, yes, I reject that, I repudiate that, yeah, I reject that, I repudiate that. But when something happens to us, right, we, the black Jews of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and our people, and our Israelite and Jewish and Israelite community, it's like we could hear crickets, right? However, the relationship has also been marked by tensions and conflicts related to issues like the Black Power movement. Zionism, and affirmative action. Word, that's interesting, right? So they give us a twofer, right? Black Power movement and affirmative action, which usually is for so-called African. Well, see, some of us, we reject that kind of African terminology. So we say European Jews. Right? You say, no, we're just Jews. Right? So we're just Yehudi. We're just Jews. Well, are you really? For sure? How are you? They'll act all surprised. Right? Somebody's not doing a good job in educating them, because a lot of Jewish scholars have written some very good books that really point out the legitimacy of our claims. Right? And this is also interesting. You would think that the educated folk would get it, right? We used to say the educated folks. A 2020 study, right, found higher rates of anti-Semitism among blacks and Latino respondents compared to white respondents, particularly among young people. It's like saying, well, there's high rates of this among the downtrodden than amongst those who benefit from white privilege. right? You know, I've heard some of the Jews, some of them in social media recently, trying to say, "Hey, yeah, it's all about white." They kind of mock it. It's kind of interesting, mock it, and mocking it doesn't make it better. Some scholars have suggested that black anti-Semitism, hey, we're back to that same old shite, right? May stem from responses to Jewish whiteness or economic competition. Competition? How come there's not economic cooperation? Huh? Right, economic cooperation, right? That's not, is that what it's about? Well, it has to be competition, right? If we cooperate, we can compete, right? But we don't cooperate, right? Where is the competition? There is no competition, right? Well, what are you talking about? Economic competition between the American Jewish community and the American black community, right? As it stands, competition. But the part about Jewish whiteness, right? You saw it right there for yourself, right? Because someone say, "Oh, you're being racist." Even if you're trying to be as level as balanced scales can be, people still have something to say because the truth is what's an offense, right? In conclusion, while the relationship between black and Jewish communities, and y'all know how I stand on that right there. Our point, I know this is the general overview, but we want to be more specific, right? Between black, Jewish, and white Jewish. Between those that are black, that identify themselves as Jewish or Judah or as Israel, and whites or those Jews that currently, when they say the Jewish community, yeah, we know there's a couple of I don't want to dismiss the brothers and sisters who are part of that community, not as tokens, so to speak, but there are those, right, within that community, especially with the airlift of the Beta Israel from Ethiopia and the acceptance of the African Israelites of Jerusalem and other Lemba people and some of the, Mashuvu? Moshavi, the Moshavi community, and in South Africa. Yes, we get all that, right? And here's a problem too, right? The amount of support, right, that has been lost because of this. So they say it's complex, characterized by periods of cooperation and tension. Some groups within the black Hebrew now notice everything is black Hebrew Israelite. All right, you notice that? Have been criticized for promoting anti-Semitic and anti-white beliefs. Notice that in the word white, they made sure they put the W in caps. You know, is that right there? So right here, there was one other one we wanted to do right here. Let's see right here. Okay, I can't do it like that. All right. How about this right here? Let's ask it the pointed question. Right. There we go. Anti-Semitism against black Jews who are Afro-Semitic. Let's see where this points to. Instances of anti-Semitism targeting black Jews who identify as Afro-Semitic are unfortunately documented. What the hell? Did you hear Lazazel? Lek Lazazel. Oh, le cool. Lazazel. Why. Instances of anti-Semitism targeting black Jews who identify as Afro-Semitic are, you know what they say? Are unfortunately documented. It's almost like this saying, AI saying, man, you got me. Got to say something because, AI is supposed to be dealing with just the evidence, right? And sorting the evidence. This can manifest in several ways. Discrimination and dismissal of identity. Discrimination and dismissal of identity. Black Jews may encounter prejudice from within Jewish communities that struggle with the concept of Jewish racial diversity. But isn't that all they're trying to say? That Jews are not just white, they're diverse, they're from maybe that those are some elements, so that's not overall. So if you see that out there, right, promoting Jewish racial diversity, we begin to think, oh, wow, they all think this. No, that's certain groups, right, amongst them. And kudos to those certain groups, right, leading to their Jewish identity being questioned or undermined, right? So black Jews may encounter prejudice within Jewish communities. You mean within white Jewish communities, right, that struggle with the concept. They struggle? Whoa, okay. So we're the ones struggling, right? But they struggle with the concept of Jewish racial diversity. Why is that? Leading to their Jewish identity, that's the black Jews, right? And this extends to Israelites, you know what I mean? With the Israelites, but what it says Yehuda, right? Yehuda first, right? Who shall go fight? Judah first, right? The idea that Ashkenazi Jews are the norm, right? Okay, this is interesting. AI. Give a round of applause to AI for a moment, because you know when we was researching before, they gave us these kind of dubious and nebulous and round the block kind of answers and everything, you know, taking us in the bushes and everything like that. The idea that Ashkenazi Jews, right, are the norm can lead to the assumption that other forms of Jewish identity are less authentic. This is exactly what many of us have been saying, right? Overlooking the long history and diversity of Yehudi, or as they say, Jewish communities and Israelite communities worldwide. Right? The notes here is contending Mardonites, right? And then secondarily, not the real Jews trope. The not the real Jews trope. Now here they're actually saying that it's the fault of other groups that may be identified as black. Like some black supremacist group may propagate the idea that black people are the true descendants of biblical Israelites. Well, when somebody's telling you that you're not true, you're fake, and you find more information, say, no, we are the true ones. Because if we were just included, you say, hey, welcome, my black Jewish brothers. What problem could we raise? What tension would there be, right? And that other Jews, including, right, they say here in this, right, Ashkenazi Jews are imposters with no authentic connection to the ancient Israelites, right? According to the Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL. I wonder whether the ADL puts into context, I don't know how they would consider, like if we found Jewish academics and authors, white Jewish academics and authors that actually, brought out evidence that there is really no authentic connection, seeing that a large majority of the ones who are Ashkenazi, according to their own story, their own evidence, actually, I can say, converted to this roughly around 740 AD. All right, so there's a connection since 740 AD. Okay, now the narrative can be found within some factions of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement and Nation of Islam. Now, some might say, what I just said right there, they say, oh, why you said that? Isn't that true? Can we bring those scholars forward? It seems like we are dealing with facts while other people selectively deal with the facts they want to deal with. You know what I mean? That's what happens right there. Yeah. Now, the American Jewish community, they're the ones who say that right there, about the whole narrative, some factions of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement and Nation of Islam, right? Now, the film Hebrew to Negroes, Wake Up Black America, which received celebrity endorsement. What was like one celebrity? Right? Well, it was one celebrity, right? Right? And they dragged him, right? Makes similar claims according to the Anti-Defamation League. I saw this, there was this white Jewish guy, he actually did a critique of it, and he had to admit that there was one fact, according to him, in the whole Hebrew to Negroes, right? And this one fact was based on, was it Rabbi, was Ishmael? I think it was this Rabbi Ishmael who was speaking about how Shem, right, Shem was black, and then Shechor Shechorim or Shachor, yeah, that was black. And they said, well, that is the only, that was the only fact he admitted, but that fact, based on some of the Yehudi, the Mishnah, Midrash, Talmud, other teachings, basically stated that Shem, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, blessed be Yahweh, the Elohe, right, of Shem, the God of Shem, blessed be the Lord God of Shem. And remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Shem, the Afro-Shemites, the Israelites. And then he was stating, Rabbi, I think De Eliezer, was it? Yeah, I think one of those rabbis, some of you know the quote that I'm speaking about that was used in the movie. He said, wow. He said, this is a fact, right? Then he tried to minimize it, but he did present that fact. But that fact, if that's the only fact in it, so Shem is black. You just gotta let that sit in. So wait, if Shem is black, and that's a rabbinical fact, right? Okay, let's come again. If Shem is black, and that's a rabbinical fact, right? Before we close out this video, I'm thinking whether I should actually find that, because I don't know, people be liars. They be like they never seen it before. Show me that. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you saying that? Well, you see that right there. Well, then they try to explain it away. Okay, lastly but not least, he targeted anti-Semitic rhetoric and action. Extreme groups within the Black Hebrew Israelites, oh my goodness, BHI movement, have been documented disseminating literature that features anti-Semitic comments, such as accusing Edomites, a term they use for modern Jews. What's interesting? In modern Judaic, Jewish and rabbinical literature, the Edom is referred to as Rome. So that means among the Jews, they refer to Edom, right, as the Romans. And by extension, the Romans as white people. You know what I'm saying? For real. So it's like the pot, it's like on a certain level, it's like the pot calling the kettle, but accusing Edomites of stealing their history and corrupting religious texts. Thus says the Anti-Defamation ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Man, we need to have something like that, right? Like an ADL, that can speak up when people be saying things about us. Not like we have to speak for ourselves, but it's like a group that can, speak the truth to power. Anyway, it's important to remember that these examples do not represent the entirety of Black-Jewish relations. Many instances of strong alliance and cooperation, it sounds like the other one, right? Between Black and Jewish community exists, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement. Oh my goodness, according to CNN. Oh my goodness. However, acknowledging and addressing the specific forms of anti-Semitism faced by Black Jews. However, acknowledging, this is what this vlog is just all about, that acknowledging and addressing the specific forms of anti-Semitism faced by Black Jews, including those who identify as Afro-Semitic, is crucial for fostering inclusivity and combating all forms of bigotry. I mean, man, these people, they can make up some words. Inclusivity. It sounds nice, right? Inclusivity, yeah? Right? It rhymes with bigotry, right? Right. Okay, so here, this one is interesting. This is probably the one that we really didn't expect. Let's just go to right here, see if we can find this right here. Rabbinical, right? Rabbinical, right? Shem was black. Let's see if it comes up like that, right? Shem was black. They're probably going to tell us, oh, yeah, it's true, but this is racist now. You can't say that, right? Shem was black. Okay, let's see if they have it up here. Let's see. It's a contentious one? Well, it exists in the rabbinical. Let's see if they have anything here, right? No, they don't want to bring up, you notice that? They don't bring up the rabbi, right? Let's call him the good rabbi. Why callest thou me good? Right? Yeah, it's in, there we go. It's the Perke de Rebbe Eliezer. Perke de Rebbe Eliezer 24 and 1. Right? Right? It's actually in this one right here. All right, this is where it's in the Perke de Rabbi Eliezer. All right, I thought that what you call them, what you call it, AI would have featured it. All right, let's see down here if we have any one of those here. Let's see if they put it. No, they of course they wouldn't choose to put it, to put it out. Right, it's a contentious one, but yet it's one that's very authentic within rabbinical and Jewish study circles. Right, I guess now they're probably going to try to like de-emphasize it, right? De-emphasize it because some of our people happen to come across it, right? Okay, let's see because we want to show you it for yourself. Let's see, Perke de Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, here we go. Right, Perke, right, Perke, right. Oh, there we go. Right, Perke, right. De Rabbi Eliezer, right, and put Shem, right. I think they try to translate it as dark. Right? Because in Shachor in Hebrew is actually literally black. Right? It's literally black, but they try to tone it down by saying that he was dark. And doing things like that is like, it's like what I mean? It seems racial, right? If it's not racist, it seems racial. You can see it over here, right? Here we go, right here. This is not as clear as a TikTok. Right, it's from a TikTok, right? Here we go here. We want to just save this right here. It says, in the book entitled Perke de Rebbe Eliezer, chapters 23 and 24, Rabbi Eliezer comments on the physical appearance of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and says that Shem was blessed black and beautiful. Right? That Shem was blessed black and beautiful, and Ham was blessed black like the raven, and Japhet was blessed white. Oh, there we go, right, there we go, right there. Japheth was blessed. So I just want to show you that, so ones and ones can. I think this is actually the Kyle Irving. It's on the forward. So if you want to see that article I was talking about, where the guy said, well, yeah, there was one true thing in there, right? And I think it's right here where they got it from, right here. Or at least this is what he used right here. An impeccable Hebrew Jewish source is Perke, the Rabbi Eliezer, who classed the entire Shemitic or Semitic people as black. Right? Can you see this here? I'm zooming in, right? It's in the red. Right? Shem was especially blessed black and beautiful. Ham was blessed black like the raven. And Japhet, which means like he was dark, like the raven is dark black, you know what I mean? Like the raven. And Japhet or Japheth was blessed white all over. Right? White all over. What we got here? Okay. Yeah. So this is an impeccable. Right, and even the guy who was critiquing the movie, he had to say like, yeah, they got us. Like he was like, yeah, they got us. This is because they know how impeccable, right, their view of the Perke, the advice, Perke, and the Perke Avot, the advice of the fathers, the Perke, the Rebbe Eliezer is that it's not like any, just run of the mill. Right, something. It's not a questionable, right? In Jewish circles, it's unquestionable, right? Basically, that's how impeccable it is. Right now, this is from the same page, but we're gonna have to probably go and get it, and kind of get it, right? We got to go and get it so that we can. Let's scroll down here, right? So this is the article. So remember the keyword searches and everything, so you can find it, right? and and who knows what else we'll find if we study, right? And give thanks to those who studied it, right? So this is going into a comment. So you can see this right here. This is more of the full of it right here. He blessed Ham, his son, making him dark like the raven, and right, that's part right there, dark like the raven. But notice up here where it says he especially blessed Shem and his sons, making them dark but comely. That's a poor translation, right? That's a bad translation. That's not a good translation, right? And we read the Hebrew, so we know that's a bad translation. It's actually the same word, right? When it says that Ham, right, it made him dark, or black. It's actually the word black, right, down here, right? It's black and, right, black and beautiful. So you see what it say, but? The but right there that's a poor translation. It's not aval. Aval, or aval in Hebrew is but. It says black and beautiful, right? Black and, not black but. Like when you say black, or yeah, you're black but beautiful. It's like saying like, okay, you black, but you still, what I'm saying? It's not really a compliment, right? It's not really a compliment in that sense. When somebody say you black but beautiful, if somebody say you black and beautiful, right? That means you black and beautiful. It describes what you are and describes that you are beautiful, black and beautiful, right? Basically, but this is this page here, right? This, if you screenshot this, and zoom in on it, you can be able to read more of this right here. It talks about how even in the translation, as we come more to the modern times, right? This is an ancient, midrash, like study on the scripture, right? Shikharim, is that Shikharim, right? Shikharim, yeah. That when they made the translation in the later version, they was trying to cover it up, right? But then afterward, other translations that came afterward kind of brought it out. So that means they were trying to hide it, hide it for themselves, because not every Yehudi really is all as fluent with the biblical Hebrew. Usually the bar mitzvah is usually symbolic. So most times one would read the translations, right, and rely on the footnote commentary. You know what I mean? But, because they were trying to cover up the black part. This is what this part says right here. You know what I mean? Where it says right here. And instead of the dangerous common denominator with black, Ham, he gets to resemble, right, the attractive white Japheth. So even within what the Perkei, the Rebbe Eliezer said, you found that later on in various translations, they was trying to kind of cover it up. They were trying to blur, right, the concomitant danger of blurring the difference, right, and even kind of emphasizing the whiteness of Japheth, right, but covering up the translation. So here is some of what's, you see the footnotes there, right, and you can see the Hebrew down here. This is the Hebrew of it, right? Can we zoom in? No, we can't zoom in anymore on this. But anyway, brothers and sisters and brothers, right? I said let me go there because I was just about to end the vid. But if I end it, ones who are looking for it be like, he's not, it's not true. But you can see right here that it is true, right? This is even on Safari. You can see on Safari, and the great thing about Safari is they have like the Hebrew on the side, so you can see the translation. A lot of times the Hebrew translations of like the Talmud and the Mishnah are not really word for word. They kind of add in words. It's always good to look at the Hebrew, right? That's a whole other video, right, that we like to do, like whether like the Talmud has been properly translated, right? In many cases it has not, right? So some of the accusations, against Jesus and others, it's not really quite as it seemed to be, right? In other words, someone translated it, and most ones that go off of the translation don't really go back to the original, right? So the Perkei, the Rebbe Eliezer, right? One can get a full text at Internet Archive. Get it while supplies last. right, as it is. Of course, she says digital supply should last forever. Well, just get it while the getting is good, right? Trust me on that. So right here, Yeshua Shalom, brothers and sisters and brothers here, and heal up to the Black American Jews. I think I'm still following them on the YouTube. You know, we got to see if we can link up. You know what I mean, and others as well. Anyway, brothers and sisters and brothers, we're gonna seal this up right here. Like, share, and subscribe. Lion of Judah Society. Oh, did you know that we are Falashas? Falasha in the Gutters mean exile. Notice the connection. So there are Falashas over there, there's Falashas over here, and according to the word of scripts, right, scattered through all the nations. Oh.